Welcome to the Building a Bulletproof Back podcast. As a physio, I'm on a mission to reduce the back pain epidemic. These conversations that you're about to listen to with leading edge teachers and back pain sufferers is my attempt to evolve the mainstream medical approach to treating stubborn back pain. You see, I firmly believe that building a bulletproof back requires mental, physical, and emotional strategy. Let's see what pearls of wisdom we can share with you today. Thanks for listening and thanks for being here. Well, episode 9 is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to repurpose a Facebook Live that I recorded during the isolation phase. I created it to pass on essentially 3 of my top tips for people in back pain wanting to do some stuff on their own when they couldn't access their favourite health practitioners. So I hope you take some joy from it. I've got other guests lined up for future episodes, but unfortunately in this one, it's all my voice. So no offence taken if you need to tune out, but I hope you find some use in some of the content that I share today. Hey everyone, I'm going to keep this real casual. Doing a live thing is always a little bit challenging because you are just chatting. I'm just going to imagine I'm chatting to people I see in my studio every day, and they are people in back pain. And for those of you that don't know me, I am a physiotherapist, among other things. But beyond physio, I've studied a lot of other things because I always felt physio was quite limited in how it viewed the body. After about 10 years in the profession, I realised that people's emotional states and the thoughts in their head were playing into their injury outcomes just as much as their physical injuries. And I would see people have horrific injuries who would recover really quickly. And then I'd see people who had fairly minor things carry on for months. And I started sort of trying to figure out why that would be the case. And I did a lot more reading. I sort of went looking more into mindset and mental resilience and looking at pathways of how we can develop that. And I also more recently, probably in the last few years, have become really interested in the biochemistry of emotions and how they affect our healing and our ability to move forward in life. So postural neurology was another area that I sort of delved into, which I found really interesting in terms of how we align our skeletal structures. And I've done a lot of work with Gary Ward's anatomy in motion, flow motion model, which is just the most purest form of assessing movement that I've ever come across. And whilst it's beautifully simple, it's also highly complicated. But when I started reflecting on my unique approach, it's not really unique in that all of I've learned is from others. But I guess what's unique is the way I have put it together. I start and have I've sort of developed over time this really solid idea that if you are in stubborn and persistent pain, so let's get that clear from the get-go. I'm not really talking about the first time you've had pain from gardening a little bit too much and then it settles down. I'm talking about this sort of back pain that just hangs around. You've had it for years, you've been to everyone, you've tried everything, and it just keeps hanging around. It keeps coming back. That is the sort of person that I'm really most interested in helping, because the longer you've had pain, some things start to happen. It becomes part of your identity. You start to restrict yourself from certain activities because you know it's going to hurt or you fear it might hurt. And that sort of really starts to have an effect on your whole psychology. It affects how you think of yourself. It affects how you interact with others. We start to take more medication, which starts to affect our neurology. So it's this sort of really interesting little pathway of decline, which is distressing to observe from a practitioner's point of view. And so I thought, all right, I'm so sick and tired of the negative messages we feed people with back pain. It's no one's fault, but our medical model was developed to react to pain. It was never developed to be proactive in helping people avoid pain. It's a beautiful model if you've broken a bone or your appendix has burst and you need to go to hospital. Great. I love our medical model. I love the drugs in the medical model for when we need them. But it's not designed to handle chronic conditions, full stop. And the disservice it does to people is that it segments us into sections. If we have a problem with our thinking, we go to a psychologist. If we are emotionally not feeling great, we either get a drug or we also get to see some sort of psychiatrist or psychologist. If our body's not working, we get sent to a physio or a chiropractor or an osteopath. And so that whole model is teaching us that we're separate somehow, that the thoughts in our head is somehow different and to the way we carry our bodies or the emotions we experience in our bodies. And it's not, just doesn't work that way. Everything is connected, from the thinking to the feeling to the movement. It's all one. And so I think the reason most people struggle with back pain is because they are coming at it from a physical body-based perspective. They are trying to fix a physical problem with physical activities. So they may be rubbing muscles, getting them stronger, dry needling them, physically treating things that hurt rather than going beyond that and asking some deeper questions. And that's, I guess, today, and what I feel now is a great opportunity whilst we're in isolation, is we've got time on our hands to think about what we could possibly, now's a great time to sort of do the work that's required to be free of your back pain. And I don't say that lightly. I don't belittle anyone in pain. And I really, if anything, I empathise with your struggle. And I think you're struggling purely because you don't have the information that you need, or maybe no one suggested the ideas that I'm going to suggest to you. And I don't know what your particular pathway is. It's such an individual, personal journey. All I see as my role is throwing the ideas out there at you and letting you resonate with what for you feels like the next thing you need to explore. So we're talking 3 tips, and I guess I start all of my interviewing of clients with this question, and it is, do you believe you can heal this thing? And that's a really potent question, because I'm amazed at the amount of people that turn up to a physio session and say, no, I don't think I can heal it. And, I realized a while back, it wouldn't matter how good I am. If the body's belief is that this thing can't be healed, then I could do backflips. I could turn myself inside out trying to help someone, but I'm coming up against that belief. And so I started leaving all of the things that I traditionally would have done and started to delve into that belief. And we started to ask questions like, when did you form that belief that you couldn't heal this? Where did it come from? Is it true? Is it actually true? And how do we open to the possibility that we could at least improve our situation? Even if you can't quite get your head around the idea of healing your spine, you may be able just to start in a gentler, softer place of, is it possible for me to improve this spine? And I think once you get to an improved spine with some of the techniques that I'll share, then maybe you could go to that next level of, well, things seem to be improving. Perhaps it is possible. And you can start to open and elevate your expectations of your own body. The biggest reason people that I see that they offer as a reason for why they can't heal their body is they'll say, well, the damage has already been done. I've damaged it, and therefore it is cactus now moving forward. It's been damaged all over. And I'm not going to deny the tissue's been damaged. We break bones. We damage bones and they heal. and we move on and we hardly remember that we've done them. So why is a back any different? Why is it that we think once a disc has been damaged that we're going to be in pain for the rest of our lives? There's just too many cases of the opposite. I have had so many patients who come in and their MRIs and their scans show all sorts of horrible things, and yet they're standing before me moving beautifully purely because they're happy and they have a great mindset about what's possible for their own bodies. So I'm not saying that's everybody, but we need to start to look at past examples for our own body and things that we have healed. What has your body successfully healed in the past? And really, are we asking it to do anything different in this situation? Your body is wired to heal. When you cut yourself, it automatically goes into doing what's required to get the job done. And healing a spine is no different. The reason I think it struggles is because we have the belief that it's going to be different, and we have fear attached to the potential it may not heal, and we have all these other overlays of things that get in the way of what our body likes to do. It could also be your movement pattern that's getting in the way of your healing. So I guess I want you to see it's not simple. For each person, the hang-up and the roadblock is going to be so unique and so different. And as a facilitator of someone's healing, I guess it's listening to your language, and it's listening to reading your body, seeing emotionally where you're at, also observing your movement patterns. And we can start to get a little bit of a vibe for you as to where the most blocking and road hurdles and the most work needs to be done. But if we're talking about our first top tip, it is 1, examine your beliefs about what's possible for your own body's healing. And remember, it knows what to do. It's an unlimited machine. When everything aligns and you give it all the right information, all the right love, all the right movement, all the right food, all the right sleep, then it can achieve amazing things. So start to believe in your own body's ability to heal. You may need some more information, and you may need to open your ideas up a little bit. And that, again, that's part of why I started the podcast. The podcast is me talking to people who are either helping others in back pain or who have healed their own spines, and they share their journey. They always share about the dark times, about that time in their life when they thought it wasn't going to heal. And then they also give some tips and ideas about how they found their way out. And, these stories are incredible, and we don't hear about them. When people talk about back pain, all we hear about are the negatives. I've lost count of the amount of conversations I've overheard at parties and social gatherings where someone mentions they've hurt their back, and there's always 3 or 4 people that are happy to jump in and say, "Oh, that's the worst," and "Oh, you'll never be the same again," and "Oh, my uncle did his disc and he's never been the same," and the negativity is overwhelming. And is it any wonder we have such deep-seated beliefs about back pain? So first tip, just start to explore your own beliefs for you about what's possible, and maybe write them down. Try and identify the key belief that may be holding you back, and either listen to the podcast to get some inspiration and hear some more positive messaging. Maybe stay in this group so you can have some more positive messaging about what's possible, and just open yourself. Say, could I open myself to an improved condition? And maybe sit with that and see if you can get comfortable with that idea for a little while. All right. Number 2, emotions. Let's talk about them because they are super exciting things. Emotions are the power. They really are. And if there's any other aspect of healing that needs more attention, it's our emotions. And again, I don't know about you, but we didn't study emotions as a physio. Not one word about emotions and the biochemistry of our blood and how they are so interrelated. The emotional. And even at school, I learned nothing about emotions. My whole upbringing about emotions was, in fact, ignore them. They're just a random thing that happen, and do never make decisions based on them. Suppress them. It's socially not appropriate sometimes to express emotions. So we learn very early on to keep them well hidden. And in fact, emotions are our true guidance in any moment. If we learn to feel them and track them and label them, then we start to become more in tune with our own bodies. We have no other way of knowing if something is for us or against us other than our emotions. So whenever we walk into a room and we feel something uneasy, that's our guidance. That's just simply your body and your guidance saying, not for me, get out of here. And unfortunately, that's when the logical brain comes in and starts saying, oh, don't be silly. Some people will think I look silly. And then we kind of downplay, and the logic comes in and swamps our emotional reaction. And I don't want to be that way. I think our emotions in any moment are our true guidance. And certainly what I have observed is that people in back pain have strong emotions, which is a great thing. It's not a bad thing. It's a great thing. If you feel things a lot, then that is, there's two people that I see. There's people that feel nothing, that have become so hardwired to listen to their thinking that they can no longer feel. And I put myself in that category. That was me. So I get those people. And then there's the feelers, those people that feel everything and they feel it so deeply. And they beat themselves up for being so emotional, and they sort of see it as a negative. And I would actually say the opposite. I think if we can learn to understand that if we want to heal, we need to hang out in more positive emotions more often, then that opens up the idea of how do we train emotions? Is it appropriate to train emotions? And what I would say is if you've been in back pain for a long period of time, you've had physical pain in your body. Now, no one can be in physical pain for a long period of time and not start to become emotionally affected by that. You can't do it. It's not possible. When you're in chronic physical pain, it affects you emotionally. And you can take painkillers, and they may take the edge off the physical pain, but it won't shift necessarily your emotional state. And so we have to sort of come at these things from different angles. But we definitely know that heavy negative emotions create a biochemistry in our blood that does not facilitate healing. It actually gets in the way of healing. And if we give the example of stress, for instance, stress is adrenaline and cortisol. Cortisol is the precursor to inflammation. So even if you're taking anti-inflammatories but getting around stressed, you may as well not be taking the anti-inflammatories because your production of cortisol is way beyond what the anti-inflammatories can sort of keep on top of. So we have to actually go a little bit deeper. And my second tip that I thought you could play with while you're in isolation would be starting to track what emotions you hang out in most often. Just track them. Just start to notice for you, what are they? Because you might say something, but when you actually start to track them, sometimes you're quite surprised that they're different to what you think. So what I'd invite you to do just for the next 7 days, every time you go to the fridge, I want you to have 3 coloured markers by your fridge. I want you to have red, which represents feeling frustrated or angry. I want you to have a green marker, which represents feeling chilled out and relaxed. I want you to have a yellow marker, which signifies being happy or joyful or cheerful. And then I want you to have a blue marker, which symbolises feeling a bit low, a bit sullen, a bit depressed. And that's a very simplistic colour association with emotions. But if you go to your fridge, which most of us do 3 or 4 times a day, just whenever you're visiting the fridge, and it's important to track our emotions throughout the day, not just at a set time, then just take a minute and think, all right, what would I give myself in this moment right now? Would I give myself a green, a blue, a red, or a yellow? And just simply put a line on a piece of paper and walk away. If you can actually identify a word, then that's even more powerful, because most of us, and certainly myself, I used to work off about 4 words for my emotions. I was either angry, frustrated, irritated, I overwhelmed, sad, or angry. There wasn't much on the higher spectrum. They were all negative, most of them, but I didn't have the nuances or the ability to say, well, actually, I'm not really frustrated. I'm a little bit edgy or restless, or, so developing a spectrum of words for your emotions helps you start to tune into where you might be sitting on the emotional scale, which helps you start to work out whether you're elevating or dropping. To heal our bodies, we need to be hanging out in the yellows and the greens for 80% of the time. So just sit with that. If we want to heal our bodies, we need to be feeling happy or chilled out and relaxed and peaceful and content for 80% of the time. Now that's a loose term, but you get the idea. The more you can hang out in those positive emotions or relaxed and calm ones, the faster your body will heal. So why don't we actually train this? Why don't we actually start to train our emotions so that our blood reflects that, and we're giving our blood and therefore our body and therefore our soft tissues what they need to actually heal? So this week, start to track them. Just start to notice. And then at the end of the week, think, all right, what am I addicted to? Which color am I addicted to? Because the other interesting thing about emotions is they are addictive. Each emotion represents a hormone. And let's say you're addicted to stress, then your body is used to a certain level of cortisol. And when it starts to drop, let's say you do chill out, then your body, because it's used to a certain level of cortisol, it will trigger a thought for you to go and do something, or something that stresses you so that your cortisol will spike again. Our bodies are always designed to keep homeostasis. And so with emotions, when we start to play with them, we have to be alert that the body is addicted to the emotional state you're in. So you have to work sometimes a little bit hard to break the addiction and to elevate yourself. If you can track this week and start to observe where you hang out, then really the tracking and the desire to move upwards into higher emotional states is really such a simple idea, and it's kind of sad that I need to even talk about it, but it's basically caring about how you feel. When you notice that you're not feeling great, go and do something that makes you feel a little bit better. You don't have to go from angry to happy, and in fact that's sometimes impossible, but we want to have this soothing of our emotions into ever elevating states. So if you're feeling a little bit irritated, you've got choices, and what we choose is so unique for us. It might be to go out in the garden, it might be to have a cup of tea, it might be to listen to some music, it might be to have a laugh with a friend on the phone. All these things are healing, and we can intentionally start to use them to change our biochemistry to start to help us heal. This is the aspect of healing that our drugs simply don't take care of. Drugs certainly alter your biochemistry, but the minute you withdraw that drug, your thinking and your feeling processes go back to what they know. So, tip 2. I obviously could go on forever, so I just need to be mindful of the time. Tip 2, you're going to get your 4 coloured markers. That was 3. Here's 4. You're going to get your 4 coloured markers, and you're just going to start to, every time you go to the fridge, start to put your colour up. Start to notice what colours start showing up more often. And then you'll have a little bit of an insight into your emotional state, and we can talk more about further tips for starting to train an upward elevation of our emotions. All right, tip 3. Now, tip 3, I'm going to talk about movement, or our physical body. And I've kept this for the last because this is where most people start. They start with the physical. And what I'm saying is we can't start there. We need to start with the beliefs. We need to start with the emotions. And then we can start to look at our physical structure, because we've created an environment where now whatever we do to our physical bodies will be well received by the rest of us. So when I talk about, or when I look at healing someone's spine, this is a huge area of personal discontent for me. I think we look at the body, we look at the sore bit, we look at the disc, we look at the vertebrae that's been affected, and we put all our attention on that one little damaged tissue or bone or muscle or nerve, And we forget to ask, but what created stress in this point? Now, often if it's a repetitive, sort of stubborn and persistent pain that keeps coming back, it's something to do with how we move. Something in our movement system keeps loading this particular area. And until you can identify what that is, it does not matter how strong you make it, because building up your core, whilst it helps, it actually locks your spine, it stabilizes the spine. That makes it a little bit stronger, but it doesn't actually help it move any better. And really, most back pain injuries are to do with your movement pattern. There are lots of footballers I've seen with amazing abdominals who still have back pain. So I learned ages ago, back pain is not much to do with abdominals. And to think that one muscle group in isolation is going to save your bacon is a little bit simplistic. It's got to be the coordinated motion of what I would say your pelvis. So hence why I've got my little guy here. If we look at what is a pelvis, so I'll bring him a little bit closer. So most injuries in our back happen about here, in these lower lumbar vertebrae, okay? And the lumbar vertebrae sit on a pelvis. A pelvis is your foundations. Your pelvis has two wing bones and it has a sacrum, which is this triangular shaped bone here. Now, these 5 vertebrae can only do what its foundation allows it to access. And the way your pelvis moves is affected by what you're standing on. Your feet, your knees, and your hips. So trying to understand why there's a dysfunction here means you need to look at a multiple of things. You need to look at the pelvis, you need to look at the hips, you need to look at the knees, you need to look at the feet, and sometimes, less common, but sometimes you also need to look at the rib cage, the head, and even the scapula and the shoulders as to work out why this part is having so much trouble. So this is where we get very individual, I've never seen 2 people who've organised their skeletal structure the same way. It is always different. So there's no recipes here. It's not as easy as saying do these 5 movements for your back. It's just not that simple. What I would say is if you're reading something like that and you're keen to give something a go, always be checking in with your body as to what feels right for you. I cannot tell you one movement that's going to fix everyone's back. It's just not that simple. But you can certainly try movements and then come back and say, well, for me, does this movement feel like it soothes me? Does it feel safe? Does it feel good? And if it does, then you're onto a winning movement. And if you just do that one movement, you'll be well and truly moving in the right direction. If you force your body to do something and the signals from it are saying hurt, unsafe, stop, don't like it, then I can guarantee that's your nervous system speaking to you and saying this movement is not for me. And it doesn't matter who's prescribing it for you. It doesn't matter if it's a physio, a doctor. Never listen to someone else's idea that they know more than what you know for your own body. You were wired with a nervous system that will guide you like your emotions will guide you. And these guidance systems are in us. They are active. They function beautifully. Let's start listening to them. So that's a little bit airy-fairy, and I get that, but I'm going to be a little bit more, I'll give you something to play with. I'm not saying it's going to fix everyone, but I think it's a nice little thing to explore is our pelvis. How does our pelvis move, and could there be a direction of blockage in our pelvis which may be creating too much lumbar spine pressure on one side or in one vertebral level? So I'm going to come to my knees now. I'm just going to take you through a very gentle movement exploration. Most of my movement ideas have come from Feldenkrais. I love Feldenkrais as a movement body of work. I've trained in Pilates. I love Pilates as well for what it offers. I would certainly prefer Feldenkrais to Pilates. I think Feldenkrais trains our nervous system. Pilates gives us really great awareness and activation of certain muscles. and everyone's going to need different pathways to follow. And as I mentioned at the start, the anatomy in motion body of work that I've studied is all about movement, and that's what these pelvic ideas, where they come from. So I want to give a big heads up to Gary Ward for his work, and if you want to explore his work further, just Google the flow motion model, Gary Ward, and start reading some of his work because it's amazing. It's simple, but it's amazing. So maybe if you feel happy kneeling, if you've got two knees that feel comfortable, all I want to get you to, I'm going to go through the 8 pelvic movements that if we can do them equally on the left and the right, then theoretically our spine has a good foundation off which to start moving purely from. These pelvic motions are what we access when we walk. They come from the gait cycle. So if you're walking, you should be able to have these motions. If you're walking and you don't have some of these motions, it's your spine that's going to be copying it. So let's have a play. The first one is just a thing called shift. Can you slide your pelvis? I'm sliding to my right knee. And can you slide to your left knee? And can you do that motion easily on both sides? And can you go the same distance on both sides? So you might start to notice that one side just feels a bit blocked, or you might notice that it's smooth, easy, and free on both sides. So we call that pelvic shift. If you're blocking on one side and it feels like, let's say I was blocking going this way and it felt like something was just tight in my lateral hip tissue, then just keep doing it. If it feels safe, if it feels easy, just go in and out a few times. What you're actually training there is a hip motion. We're actually training our right hip to abduct better. And for it to abduct better, we've got to have the pelvis move over the top of it a little bit better. So playing with your shift and evening it out from right to left is a really simple idea to get started with. Okay, let's talk about rotation. If I keep my rib cage still, can I rotate my pelvis to the left and can I rotate it to the right? Sorry, I'm going left and now I'm going right. So if you put your hands on your hip bones or the front of your pelvis and you think about turning the lights from the left to the right, in this action, I'm just taking my whole body. So you could start with just that idea. Can you turn your pelvis equally from right to left? As you're doing this motion, what you don't want to be doing is combining it with a shift. You literally just want to say, all right, does this one go as well as this one? And again, this is actually checking in with our hips, because when I turn to the right, I have one hip that is externally rotating and I have one that is internally rotating. So I've got to have hip balance for my pelvis to be able to do what it needs to do. If you can get just the whole rotation happening, then you might want to play with starting to isolate it. Can you hold your rib cage still and just start to isolate the pelvis? Now, when we're doing these movements, we're getting conditioning and strengthening of different muscle groups, but we're not focused on the muscles. We're focused on the quality of the bones moving. Can they move equally in both directions? Because when the bones move, the soft tissues around them have to react. And so they're getting some nice lengthening or eccentric activation and then some concentric activation. So we're working our core, but we're not trying to pull things in and breathe out in certain ways. We're just moving and we're just starting to feel, can I do these movements? So we've done 4. We've done shift left, shift right, rotate left. Let's talk about our tilts. So if I curl or I lift my pubic bone up and my rib cage drops down, can I get a backward tilt of my pelvis? And then when I take my pubic bone forward and I lift my rib cage, can I get a forward tilt in my pelvis? These two motions, actually, one's a forward tilt, one's a backward tilt. When I forward tilt, I'm opening my abdominals and I'm working my back extensors. When I backward tilt, I'm using my abdominals and I'm actually stretching out my back extensors. So being able to have access to both those movements on a rib cage that responds well and moves freely with it are actually really great movements to have. You'll notice that one feels better for you than the other. Some of you will like a forward tilt, some of you will find relief in a backward tilt. Some of you, depending on how cute you are, there will be none of those movements that feel soothing. And in which case you need to start right back on the floor, starting to move. The final one that we're going to talk about is what we call hike and drop. So can we, when we bend one leg, feel our pelvis drop? And when we straighten that leg, can we feel it come up? And when we do it on the other side, does it drop as much as it does each side? So these movements are to do with our sacroiliac joints, our hips, our knees, our feet. When I drop my left knee, my pelvis drops and the left side of my spine gets a stretch. When I hike on this leg and I lock my knee, my spine on this side gets a compression. So being able to have the pelvis move from a hike and a drop freely just means our spine gets the stimulus it needs on either side. Now, some of those movements, if you're in back pain, are going to hurt or feel blocked or feel restricted. I'm not saying do them. What I'm doing is these are the movements that I assess a pelvis with. If I can see that a pelvis can do all these movements, then we are really looking very nice for a great outcome. If we identify a block in one of those movements, your sort of ability to get moving quickly is going to be fast. If 4 or 5 of those movements are blocked, then there's going to be more work required and it's probably going to take a little bit longer. But you'll get there. If you can train the motions and you can understand and work out why they're blocking, remembering that a blocked motion in your pelvis could be coming from a knee or a foot or even a head or a shoulder or a past injury or a scar, then if you go looking, you can slowly start to work out what may be the issue. And from there, you can start to track forward. So if we're going to recap, you're in isolation, you've got time on your hands, you're going to start to shift a bit of focus into healing your spine. It starts with a belief. Do I actually believe it's possible? You've got to convince yourself of that, and there's ways you can convince yourself of that. Number 2, you're going to maybe start to track your emotions with the idea of understanding if you can end up in yellows and greens 80% of the time, then your biochemistry is going to be amped up for healing. And number 3, you're going to have a little movement exploration of your pelvis and maybe start to figure out some things about why it's blocking. If you're looking for more movement-related drills to practice, I would recommend you Google Feldenkrais for back pain. There are some amazing Feldenkrais practitioners out there, and their movement patterns are so slow, so safe. They help you piece together for you what might be blocking. And that's a nice, safe place that I could say anyone could start with Feldenkrais. Once you restore quality movement, then really it's about getting it strong and conditioned. And that's when the whole world opens up as to further possibilities for strength and conditioning. There's not one way, there's multitudes of ways. And again, if you tune into your emotions, they will guide you into which sort of movement pattern for you is going to light you up. For me, it is ultra running. I just love to run. Doesn't have to be hard. I just love a long, slow run out in nature where I get to play and feel with all of these movement concepts. But for you, it might be ocean swimming, it might be supboarding, who knows? It could be yoga. There's no right or wrong. It'll be whatever you're drawn to. Right, so really, I want just feedback about the live when you watch it. Lots of you couldn't make it today, but it'll just be up and you can watch it in your own time. Comment about anything that you're getting snagged on, anything you need more help with, and we can build out some more one-on-ones from that session. For those of you who don't know, I have created a 8-week online course. It's called the Building a Bulletproof Back program. Week 1 is about your mindset. Week 2 is about your emotions. And from there, we go into more movement-related drills. I created it because my personal mission is to start selling the message that healing is possible. I really just think we need to shout it and scream it. There's too much negativity going on in the back pain world, too many drug addicts being created by overuse of opiates, and too many relationships breaking down because of the misery that is back pain. So if you've liked anything or resonated with anything that I've said today, share it with anyone you know that might also benefit from having a more positive message. And find the course. I'll put the link in somewhere in this group if it's not already. And think about maybe going on the journey. At any point you get stuck, you can access me for some more one-on-one interventions. But I've put as much into that program as I can, and it is all the tips that I've found from all the readings that I've done in 20-something years. It's all in there. It's just, if you can't get better after going through that program, then I give up. You might be one of the few that I just can't help. But hopefully we can start to send a more positive message about our body's healing capacity. And that's my firm desire, and that is my mission, and that is my intent. So if you'd like to help me with that, I would be forever grateful. Okay, I'm going to sign off now. And thank you to those guys that did listen and were here. That was lovely that you could join me live. Okay, bye. Thanks for listening to today's episode. I sincerely hope my guest and I were able to share some valuable insights. If you know anyone struggling with stubborn back pain, please share the podcast with them. And for more information on my 8-week online Building a Bulletproof Back program, or for consulting with me privately via Zoom, check out the links in the show notes. Spread the message. There is hope for back pain sufferers when they find the right tools and the right people. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.